In the annals of American criminal history, few figures have sparked as much intrigue and controversy as Ma Barker. J. Edgar Hoover's declaration of her as the most vicious, dangerous, and resourceful criminal brain of the last decade painted a portrait of a criminal mastermind that would captivate the public imagination for generations. Yet beneath this sensational characterization lies a complex narrative that challenges our understanding of her true role in one of America's most notorious criminal enterprises. Was she truly the calculating matriarch of a criminal empire, or merely a convenient scapegoat for the FBI's narrative? The story begins in the modest setting of Ash Grove, Missouri, where Arizona Clark entered the world in 1873. Born to Scotch-Irish farming parents, her early years seemed unremarkable, characterized by the typical rhythms of rural American life. However, a fascinating detail from her childhood would later take on almost mythological significance. Young Arizona reportedly witnessed the legendary outlaw Jesse James passing through their town. This encounter, whether fact or embellished folklore, would later be seen as an almost prophetic moment, foreshadowing the outlaw legacy that would define her family's future. The image of James, a figure who straddled the line between folk hero and criminal, might have left an indelible impression on the young girl's understanding of justice, loyalty, and survival in America's rapidly changing landscape. The trajectory of Arizona Clark's life took a significant turn in 1892 when she married George Barker, marking the beginning of a new chapter that would be defined by constant struggle and hardship. The couple's life together was far from the American dream they might have envisioned, as they found themselves trapped in a cycle of poverty that would follow them across state lines. Together, they brought 4 sons into the world: Herman, Lloyd, Arthur, and Fred. These boys, who would later become infamous in their own right, grew up watching their parents scrape by, moving from town to town across Missouri and Oklahoma in search of better opportunities. The constant relocations and financial instability would leave an indelible mark on the family's psyche, perhaps planting the seeds of desperation that would later bloom into full-fledged criminality. As the Barker boys grew older, their path toward criminality became increasingly clear, with Herman's arrest for highway robbery marking the family's first serious brush with the law. The brothers' association with the Central Park Gang signaled a deeper descent into organized crime, while their mother's response to their activities would later become the subject of much speculation. Ma Barker's infamous quote defending her son's behavior, "No good boy of mine would ever kill a man," would later be seen as either evidence of maternal denial or a calculated attempt to protect her criminal enterprise, depending on one's interpretation of her role. The family's criminal trajectory reached a tragic milestone in 1927 when Herman, facing capture by law enforcement, chose to end his life rather than face imprisonment. This devastating event, rather than serving as a wake-up call, seemed to push the remaining family members further into the criminal underworld. The formation of the Barker-Karpis gang marked a new era in the family's criminal evolution. When Fred Barker was paroled in 1931, he joined forces with Alvin Karpis, creating what would become one of the most notorious criminal partnerships of the Depression era. The humble beginnings of their operation, centered around Ma Barker's modest shack, belied the sophistication and violence that would come to characterize their criminal activities. The murder of Sheriff C. Roy Kelly served as a brutal announcement of the gang's willingness to use deadly force, cementing their reputation in the criminal underworld and drawing the attention of federal law enforcement. This period marked the transition from small-time criminals to organized outlaws, with the gang's activities becoming increasingly bold and sophisticated. The transformation of the Barker family from struggling farmers to notorious criminals paralleled the broader social upheavals of the early 20th century. As America grappled with economic hardship and social change, the line between survival and criminality became increasingly blurred for many. The Barker-Karpis gang emerged during a time when bank robbers could sometimes find sympathy among a public that had grown distrustful of financial institutions in the wake of the Great Depression. Whether Ma Barker was an active participant in planning these crimes or simply a mother unable or unwilling to stop her son's descent into violence remains a subject of historical debate, but the impact of their activities on American criminal history is undeniable. The Barker-Karpis gang reached the height of their infamy in the early 1930s, carrying out crimes that shocked the nation and demonstrated their audacity. Among the most notorious were the high-profile kidnappings that marked a dangerous escalation in their criminal repertoire. By this time, the gang had established a stronghold in St. Paul, Minnesota, a city with a well-earned reputation for shielding criminals. The corrupt protection of Police Chief Thomas Brown allowed gangs to operate with near impunity as long as they agreed to stay out of local politics and share a portion of their ill-gotten gains. This permissive environment became the perfect breeding ground for the Barker-Karpis gang's increasingly bold activities. Their first significant kidnapping occurred in June 1933 when the gang abducted William Ham, a wealthy brewer and heir to the Ham's brewery fortune. Using precision planning, the gang intercepted Ham while he was walking near his office in broad daylight. They blindfolded him and transported him to a secluded hideout, where he was held for several days. The Barker-Karpis gang demanded $100,000 in ransom, a staggering amount for the time. Ham's family paid the ransom, and he was released unharmed, though deeply shaken. This crime not only brought immense financial gain to the gang, but also elevated their profile as one of the most dangerous criminal enterprises in the Midwest. Buoyed by the success of the Ham kidnapping, the gang set their sights on an even more lucrative target. In January 1934, they abducted Edward Bremer, a prominent banker with ties to influential political figures, including President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The kidnapping of Bremer was a far more calculated and ambitious operation. The gang stalked their target for weeks, learning his daily routines and identifying the ideal moment to strike. On the day of the abduction, Bremer was forced from his car and into the custody of the gang. Like Ham, he was taken to an undisclosed location and held for ransom. However, the stakes were significantly higher in this case. The Barker-Karpis gang demanded $200,000, a sum that required delicate negotiations and substantial effort from Bremer's family to gather. Once the ransom was paid, Bremer was released, physically unharmed but deeply traumatized by his ordeal. These kidnappings were widely publicized, drawing national attention and increasing pressure on law enforcement to capture the gang. What the Barker-Karpis gang failed to anticipate, however, was how these crimes would ultimately lead to their downfall. The FBI, under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover, had begun employing advanced forensic methods, including fingerprint analysis, to track the perpetrators. In the Ham case, the Bureau made a groundbreaking discovery. They identified a latent fingerprint on a ransom note that could be traced back to the gang. This innovation marked a turning point in law enforcement's ability to combat organized crime and placed the Barker-Karpis gang under relentless scrutiny. The growing heat forced the gang to flee St. Paul, scattering to various hideouts in an attempt to evade capture. But their movements were being carefully tracked by federal agents. The walls began to close in on the gang in January 1935 when Arthur Barker was apprehended in Chicago. During his arrest, authorities discovered a map that pinpointed a secluded house in Ocklawaha, Florida. Believing it to be the gang's hideout, the FBI quickly mobilized to investigate. On January 16, 1935, FBI agents surrounded the small lakeside house in the early morning hours. Inside were Ma Barker and her son Fred, who had been using the property as a temporary refuge. The agents called for the occupants to surrender, but the response was a barrage of gunfire. Thus began one of the most infamous shootouts in FBI history, lasting more than 4 hours. Armed with submachine guns and rifles, Fred Barker fiercely resisted the agents' advance, while Ma reportedly provided support. The sound of gunfire echoed across the lake, drawing a crowd of onlookers who gathered to witness the spectacle. When the smoke finally cleared, both Ma and Fred Barker were dead. Ma was found clutching a submachine gun, though there is debate about whether she had actively fired it. Fred's body was riddled with bullet wounds, a testament to the ferocity of the firefight. Inside the house, agents discovered an arsenal of weapons, including submachine guns, pistols, and rifles, as well as a significant cache of ammunition. The sheer volume of firepower recovered suggested the gang had been prepared for a prolonged standoff. In the aftermath of the shootout, the FBI publicly displayed the bodies of Ma and Fred Barker to confirm their deaths and assert the agency's victory over one of the most feared criminal gangs of the era. This macabre display drew significant attention, but it also sparked controversy over the role Ma Barker had played in the gang's operations. J. Edgar Hoover wasted no time in shaping the narrative. In a statement to the press, he described Ma Barker as the most vicious, dangerous, and resourceful criminal brain of the last decade. This characterization painted her as the mastermind behind the Barker-Karpis gang, a calculating matriarch who orchestrated their crimes and commanded their loyalty. Hoover's portrayal served to justify the FBI's aggressive actions and solidify its reputation as the nation's premier crime-fighting organization. However, this version of events was not universally accepted. Alvin Karpis, the gang's surviving leader, offered a starkly different perspective in his later years. In his autobiography, Karpis dismissed the idea of Ma Barker as a criminal mastermind, calling it the most ridiculous story in the annals of crime. He described her as a devoted but naive mother who provided shelter and cooked meals for her sons and their accomplices. According to Karpis, Ma had no involvement in planning or executing the gang's crimes, and the image of her as a ruthless leader was a fabrication designed to sensationalize the story. The truth likely lies somewhere in between these conflicting accounts. While there is little evidence to suggest that Ma Barker played a direct role in the gang's criminal operations, her unwavering loyalty to her sons and her willingness to shield them from law enforcement made her complicit to some degree. Her life and death became the subject of intense public fascination, with her story being retold and reimagined in books, films, and television shows. Hollywood, in particular, seized upon the myth of Ma Barker, transforming her into a larger-than-life figure. Films such as Ma Barker's Killer Brood, 1960, and Bloody Mama, 1970, portrayed her as a fearsome matriarch who ruled her gang with an iron fist. These depictions blurred the lines between historical accuracy and artistic license, embedding the myth of Ma Barker into popular culture. Whether celebrated or vilified, these portrayals ensure her place in the pantheon of American outlaws. As the years have passed, the legend of Ma Barker has continued to captivate audiences, raising enduring questions about her true nature. Was she a devoted mother caught in the web of her son's criminal activities? Or was she a willing accomplice and enabler? How much of her story is rooted in fact, and how much is the product of sensationalism and propaganda? These questions remain unanswered, leaving Ma Barker as one of the most enigmatic figures in American crime history. If you've been fascinated by the story of Ma Barker and the Barker-Karpis gang, there's so much more to uncover. Dive deeper into the lives of history's most notorious outlaws and explore the truth behind their legends. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more riveting tales from the shadowy corners of history.